Good morning. We're learning as this chus for Shlema Filana Chaya Baser and Nun Dalit Amr Aleph. So I'm going to just go back. My Havala Yisaid. If you remember, we have the picture back on Amid Beis. We have the picture of the way the Yisaid was on the Mizbeach, right? On the previous, if you look just on the previous Amid and Rashi. So there was no Yisaid really on two sides, on the southern side as well as the eastern side, the side that was closest to the entrance. So the Gemara says, "My lahavi lo Yisaid." What does it mean that there was no Yisaid there? Rav Binyan Levi Amar Bedam. Rav says it means that there was no physical Yisaid on that side. Levi says the Mizbech. Well, I just went back a little bit.
Oh.
Just saying what, because we're going to have a bunch of rice back and forth on this.
Yeah.
So I just backed up a little. And Levi says, and also because Rafal wasn't there last night.
But no,
and Levi says it's bedamin. Levi says it doesn't mean that there was no physical use. That Yesod, that foundation of the Mizbech, that one amma ledge on the bottom of the Mizbech went all the way around the Mizbech, but it just means that it didn't get dam, that it wasn't Mekudesh for Kabbalah's dam. So Rav Metargum Bachsante Yasvani Midvacha. Rav was used the Targum Onkelos of in the Yerusha. That's where the Mizbech was. Living time Bachsante Yasvani Migdasha. That's where the Kedusha was. To each to Makam Mekudesh Ladam. Okay, but that's the Machlekes. Rav says that it was missing a physical part of the Yesod, and Levi says it was just that part wasn't Kaddish, but it extended all the way around. So Gemara is going to bring a bunch of rayas both ways. Tashma. The Yesod went on the entire north part and the entire western part of the Mizbech. And then extended one amma into the south and one amma into the east. My Eichel. So the Gemara is saying it says Eichel B'daram and Eichel and in the Mizrach. So it sounds like Rav, that Rav says that it was missing a part. There was only Eichel into the Mizrach and the Daram. So Gemara, my Eichel nami b'damim. No, what it means the Eichel that extended in, it means as far as the part that could be Makabel Dam. It doesn't mean that it extended, that it didn't extend all the way around. Tashma, HaMizbeach hayishloishim mushtayim al shloishim mushtayim. The Mizbeach was 32 by 32. Now, the 32 by 32 is only if you include the Yesod. If you don't include the Yesod on two sides, then it's really 32 by a little bit. It has one amma sticking out on each side. That corner is 32, but the rest of it is only 31. So it says no. It means the longest length on each side was 32. It didn't mean it was 32 by 32 square. It meant that the together with those corners it reached 32. Tashma nimsa perech ama al Yesod va'ama al Soviv. This takes a little bit of explanation. Rashi explains that we have a Gemara in Parakotche Kachim later on, not that long, in about a week or so, that one Mishnah says that the Kevesh, the ramp, was 32 amas long, and another Mishnah says that the Mizbeach was 32 amas in width, and I'm sorry, that's the same Mishnah, I think. And then the Mishnah says that the two of them together was 62. Now 32 plus 32 is 64. How do you get to 62? So that's what we're saying. Tashma, nimsa parech amal Yesod va'amal Soviv. That the ramp covered over, it extended over part of the Mizbeach. If you remember, right, the Mizbeach, and this is going to be relevant in the next Gemara also. The Mizbeach had like sort of steps. There was the Yesod, which was one amma. Then it went up, I think, like 4 ammas. I think these are pretty clean. The rest of everything else is dusty. Yeah. But someone was sitting on these. And then there was a Soviv, when they would do the Avodah on the top, the Chatas that was done on the Karen, they needed like a catwalk in middle of the Mizbeach, and that also went in by an amma. So it's sort of the ramp fitted over. It wasn't up against the bottom ledge, and it makes sense, right? Because the ramp had to get you to be able to walk onto the mizbeach, the top of the mizbeach itself. So if it only went to where the side was, that would be sticking out 2 amas. It would be 2 amas away from the mizbeach, from the top of the mizbeach. So it went over those 2 amas. So
like a bridge.
that's what the ramp was like. It was a ramp, but it had to reach onto the top of the mizbeach. So in order to do so, it had to cover over 2 amas, the 2 amas that the mizbeach extended on the bottom. Right, the mizbeach was like a birthday cake. It went up and down. So it was 32 from the one end to the other. It was 32 from one end to the other end of the ramp. But 2 of those amas were covering over part of the mizbeach. It was overlapping. So maybe in Malvin Shu Shleishin, yeah. I'm sorry, I skipped. Tashan Nimtza Perech Amal Yisayv Amal Sayviv. But this is all on the southern side. And according to Rav, there was no Yisoid on that side. So it should really only be overlapping by 1 amma, not by 2 ammas. So it should really be then 63 ammas total, the kevesh and the mizbeach. So tomorrow, Ema kneged amma Yisoid ve'el amma Sayviv. There wasn't really a side there, but they had an extra amma to include that. That means even though there wasn't actually a side, they still included that in the cheshbon. But it was over the amma of the Sayviv. Toshma, the Tani Levi, Ketzad Boinen Mizbech. How did they build the Mizbech? How they physically construct it? So maybe in Malvin, they would take a form like a mold. There was 32 by 32. The problem was how did you build it? Like we said, it was like a birthday cake, right? It went up 1 amma for the Yisaid. Then it went up like 4 ammas. Then it was a Sayviv that went in 1 amma. And then it went up for the rest of it. And the top, you had the 4 kronim. So how do they do it? First, they'd make a form of shloishim shtayim al shloishim shtayim, 32 or 32, which was the width of the base. But goiva amma, that was 1 amma high because that was going to include the Yisaid. Or maybe chaluke avanim mefumas. They would bring smooth stones, bengdelis, bengtanis, whether big or small, or maybe sid, v'kunya, v'zephas. They would bring lime and a type of lead and tar, umamacha, and they would, I guess, melt them together or stir them together, make it into a cement, and they would pour it into the stones that were in this mold. Zeu makam Yisaid, and that was the Yisaid. V'chayzer maybe malvan shu shloishim amma al shloishim amma. They would make a second box of 30 ammas of 30 by 30 ammas, with gavaya chamish ammas. That was 5 ammas high, and then they would do the same procedure with it. Maybe chaluke avanim, and then they would place that on top of the first one. So then since one was 32 and the other one was 30, you'd end up having the side sticking out an amma on all sides. Maybe malvan shu kafches al chavches ammas. Then they take another one of 28 by 28, v'gayavai gimel amas, or maybe chalukay v'humak, and then they would put that on top, and then you'd have the sayviv sticking out for the kehanim to walk on, and then on the top of that, humakam hamaracha, on top of that, 28 by 28, that was the actual top of the mizbeach, that was the place where they put the fire. Then they take another form that was 1 amma by 1 amma, maybe chaluke avanim b'fumas, bengdos b'tanis, maybe zavas v'kunyo macha b'shayfach, and they would make these 1 amma by 1 amma pieces. V'zeu karen, and that was the karen. B'chein l'chol karen u'karen. They would do that 4 times to make the 4 kronos for the mizbeach. So the problem obviously is, according to Rav, that says physically there was no yisoid on base almost half of the mizbeach. How did you do this? How could you do it 32 by 32? So the Gemara answers, and if you'll suggest the guy is late, that they would cut out the part that wasn't supposed to be there. If the Torah says it has to be full stones, you couldn't have stones that were broken as part of the mizbech. They would put all these stones in, and then there would be smooth, round stones, and they would put a cement on it. You couldn't have a half a stone, and if you're going to start cutting it, it's going to certainly be some half stones. So Gemara, so there was a different one. They did something else. The machas midi mitusya, the shakale. When they were building it, they put inside the form, they like maybe put a beam of wood that in the spot where there wasn't going to be a site. So even though it was 32 by 32, they put some object in it that it should be missing on those sides, on the two sides where there was no side and there were no rocks in there.
And so it wasn't Shlemus?
I'm sorry.
How does that work with again?
When they first made the mold,
yeah,
they made put something that some of the parts of it there were no rocks in there. They didn't make the mold in that part. They carved out part of it. There was no rocks, so everything was still whole rocks.
I mean, the form was 32 by 32, but they would cut out parts of that extra piece of wood in it.
Not cut out. They would put it into the mold.
On some places you would like
There's nothing there.
You wouldn't want to have the lip.
Lizzie's looking very mystified.
Because it seems like I'm just trying to figure out because it says avanim shlemus, right? So in other words, I always thought for some reason like they had a big chunk of wood, right? They had that worm, the shamir, and then but now it seems like it was a wooden form.
But it was because you're thinking of the shamir. That was for I think like the choshen and the ephod.
Yeah. So what's the avanim shlemus? What was avanim shlemus?
The shamir. I think the shamir was for I think the what do you call it? The choshen to put the names in the jewels because they weren't allowed to. I don't think every stone that was there had to be cut with the shamir.
But here it doesn't seem like it was stones. It was only the inside was stones. So what is this avanim shlemus?
The inside was stones, and then they covered it with nechoshes, with copper.
Inside. So in other words, you can't cut the inside stones, but it's saying that it was empty.
Right. The stones that were inside of it all had to be whole stones, but it wasn't all one big stone.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it wasn't like marble or quartz.
But I always thought like everything was rock.
And it was stuck together with cement. That's what it describes.
It's a concrete block, essentially.
At the end, it was like one big I mean, I guess usually our concrete is very small stones. It looks like a single thing. This is more bigger stones that were
melted down,
cemented together.
It was melted down, though. It looks like
the cement.
The rocks also.
No, the rocks weren't melted. They didn't melt rocks. No.
Well, pieces of rocks basically just cemented together.
Yeah, if you look like sometimes you see on a sidewalk, sometimes you'll have the old-fashioned sidewalks that were made out of pebbles that were put together. That's what it was.
All right. Basically, I would not be on the towels team.
So and I could prove to you that that's the case, that they had to have been able to carve out part of what they were forming. Hada Amar of Kahana, Avanim Shel Kronos Chalulas Haya. The insides of these kronos, the 4 1-by-1 amma kronos, were empty in the middle. They were hollow. And they filled it like in a bowl, like the corners of the mizbeach. So how do you have that the kronos were empty? They were empty like a bowl. It must be that there was something when they made the 1 amma by 1 amma, they put a bowl underneath it to leave so that there was space underneath it. And so too with the whole mizbeach by the Yesod, according to Rav. Darash Rab, Ma'idich Vayelech David Shmuel Vayeshvu Benoyis Berama. It says that David and Shmuel went and they sat in Noyis and Rama. B'chima in Noyis Eitzel Rama. There's two separate places. What does it mean? They sat in Noyis and in Rama. Elashar Yoshim Berama. The place they were sitting was in Rama. Va'oiskim Benoyis Shalaylam. They were sitting in the most beautiful. They were busying themselves was the most beautiful thing in the world. What is that? The Beis Hamikdash. Amri Ksiv, the Kamtol Yisrael HaMoka. The Torah says that you're going to go up to the place, to the Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hamikdash Gavaya Michal Eretz Yisrael. That tells you that the Beis Hamikdash was the highest place in all Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael Gavaya Michal Eretz. I said Eretz Yisrael is the highest of all the lands. They have it, which is not really relevant here. They have a Yadi Duchte Heicha. But they, even though they knew that it was in the highest place in Eretz Yisrael, how do you identify what is the highest place in Eretz Yisrael? They didn't have, I guess, barometers, right? That's how you would use to
pressure.
Right, the higher up you go, the lower the pressure. So that's how you test. They didn't have that. So how do you determine what's higher? I see Sefer Yeshua. They took a Sefer Yeshua. Bekulu Ksiv, in Sefer Yeshua, it describes the borders between Yehuda. Yehuda, part of its border is with Binyamin, and part of it, Yehuda's all to the south, right? The whole Negev is all Yehuda. And then toward the north, basically goes up to Yerushalayim, and toward the north is all the other Shvatim. And so part of the border of Yehuda is with Binyamin, that's by Yerushalayim, and parts are other Shvatim. And all across that border, the Torah describes how the border went, and it says, by all the other Shvatim, when they meet up with Yehuda, it says that they went up, and it went down, and it went to the side. Wherever it says that Yehuda's border with Binyamin was, it says that Yehud, and it goes up toward Binyamin. That tells you that Binyamin, which was Yerushalayim, that was the Malkum, that was the highest place in Eretz Yisrael. Savar lemivnaya ba'ayin etam, the Midli. They wanted to build it in Ayin Etam, which is a place that's a little bit higher than the Malkum HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. Amri Nisasi Be Khalil, which I don't know what the words mean exactly. Nisasi, the Mr. Shash explains it, and the Hagais Tziyunim, I think. But they say it means that they said let's lower it down a little bit. Nisasi means the icy, put it down a little bit. The Torah says that the Beis Hamikdash should be bank safe of by the shoulders, not by the head, a little bit lower down. Another way that they knew not to put it at the absolute highest spot, but a little bit lower. The Miri, the Sanhedrin Bechalka de Yehuda, Ushchina Bechalka de Binyamin. That the Sanhedrin is, as if you remember from the other day, that we said that the border of the Mizbeach was the border between Yehuda. The entrance to the Beis Hamikdash is Yehuda, and then going through past the Mizbeach and into the Heichel and to the Kachay Kachay was Binyamin. And if you remember back from Masechta Sanhedrin, that the Sanhedrin was in one of the Lishkoyas that were near the entrance to the Beis Hamikdash. So that was the Sanhedrin. The Shechina, which was the Heichel and the Kachay Kachim, was in Chalka de Binyamin. V'madlinan le mispalik tuva. If you were going to make the Mizbeach, the whole Beis Hamikdash, further into the Chelik of Binyamin, which you'd have to do if you're going to put it a little bit higher, it would be far away from the Sanhedrin. Mutav de nitesi beporta k'dichsevu ben kseifa shachin. Better to put it a little bit lower down, because the Torah said ben kseifa shachin. It says anyway that it should be a bit lower down, and we want it to be near the Sanhedrin, so therefore they lowered the Beis Hamikdash. V'al zeh niskana doeg ha'adaimi b'David. Doeg ha'adaimi was jealous of David. That was what ended up with that whole disaster with the Noiv, the Noivir HaKehanim. Doeg was jealous of David that he got to choose the Makom HaMikdash. And therefore he caused the whole thing that Shaul ended up killing them. Kedachsiv, kikanesi beisecha achaltani. Kinas beisecha achaltani. He said, Doeg said that the kinna of your house ate me up. That it's I think it's making a drasha that says kinas beisecha, the kinna on you're being Isaac in the bias. Uksiv zachar Hashem David es kol anusai I should remembered all of his difficulties. Asher Nishbal Hashem, that he made a shvuah to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Where's the pasuk? Asher Nishbal Hashem Nodar Labi Yaakov Im Ovi Ba'oil Beisi. David said, "I'm going to make a neder that I'm not going to come into my house. Im Elel Erisha Yitzui. I'm not going to go to my place where my children are. Im Etein Shnas La'enai V'Apai Tnuma. I'm not going to allow sleep to my eyes and any slumber. Until I find a place for the Rebbeinu Shalom, for the Beis Hamikdash." And then the pasuk continues, Hine Shamanua B'Efrasa, I found it in Efrasa, Matanua B'Steyar. And I found it in the Steyar, in the forest. B'Efrasa is Yeshua, the Kasim Ephraim. So Efrasa is a reference that he was trying to find the highest place, and he looked and said for Yeshua. Yeshua was from Shevet Ephraim, so this is David saying, I found it in Ephraim by looking in Sefer Yeshua. Matzuna b'Seyar, Zeh Binyamin. The forest is a reference to Binyamin. D'chsev Binyamin Ze'av Yitref. He was like a wolf lives in the forest. So that was David saying that he went into the forest to find the Beis Hamikdash. That is as much as we're going to get of God stuff for a while. I hope you enjoyed it.
But is it actually the highest place? Isn't like Golan higher than Himalayas?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Even physically, it could be. Hermon, I think, is the highest place. Right? That's where they have the snow. Yeah. Listen, you have to say it doesn't mean physically highest. Even the Ella, you go up to Yerushalayim. This is Makom Kedusha, where Avram did. This is where Yaakov slept on his way, where Avram brought the Akedah. That's the way I imagine that's the way they would answer it.
Nothing is literal.
Nothing is ever fully literal, right? So the Mishnah. Zivchai shal mitzibur. Vashamas, we're continuing with our listing of Kachay Kachim. So, strangely enough, until I saw this Mishnah yesterday, I didn't know this, but there are some shlamim that are Kachay Kachim. The Shalmei Tzibur, which are the shlamim that are brought on Shavuos. You bring a bunch of karbanos for the Shtei HaLechem. So those shlamim are Kachay Kachim. And Hashamis, the Hashamis are also Kachay Kachim. Elohein Hashamis. What are Hashamis? So we've come across, it's always good to have another list. First of all, the Asham Gzelis. If someone denies that he owes money and he makes a shvuah, so he has to pay back the money and he has to pay a chaimish, and he also has to bring this Asham. Asham Mi'ilois, someone who is Moil Behektish by mistake, he brings an Asham. He has Hana from Hektish, from certain types of Kachim. He has to have Hana either with Kachay Kachim at any time or Kachim Kalim after the Zrikas Dam, then the Emurim become Kachay Kachim. Asham Shivcha Charufa, which Rashi over here explains if a Shivcha Knainis is allowed to marry, quote unquote. It's not really a full marriage, it's not Kedushin and Nisuim, but she can marry an Eved Ivri. She would give it to an Eved Ivri. And that has a certain, somewhat a status of marriage, like a common law marriage. And if someone is ba on the Shivcha Charufa, this woman who is put together with an Eved Ivri, he has to bring an Asham. Asham Nazir, a Nazir who became Tameh, then in order to resume his Naziris, he has to bring an Asham. Asham Mitzayra, part of the Taira of a Mitzayra is he has to bring an Asham. And Asham Tali, one of our favorites, we said that if someone is not sure if he was over on something, like if you eat chaylev, you have to bring a chatas, and he ate one of two things, and one of them was chaylev, and he doesn't know if he ate the one that was a chatas, then he brings the asham tali until he finds out. Shchitas and bitzafen, all these things are kachay kachem, and the shchita is bitzafen. The kibul dam and the klishar is bitzafen, and the kabel dam and the klishar is bitzafen. The dam and ton shtei matan shein arba, and you do the shtei matan shein arba, which we have the machlokes that mean separate ones within an amo. Does it mean you have to do one strip that covers over the corner, kamin gamma, like an L-shaped. B'necholim lefnim menakloim, you're restricted. You can only eat it in the Beis Hamikdash. Lezichri kahuna, to the zecharim of kahanim, kachim cannot be eaten by the families of the kahanim. It's only to be eaten in the Beis Hamikdash by the zecharim. B'chol meichel, it could be prepared in any way. Again, not like the Pesach, which you have to roast. L'yayim v'layla ad chatzais. You can eat it for a day and a night, but midrabanan, you can't eat it the whole night. You can only eat it up till chatzais. Talk the Gemara. Minal and the boy tzafin. Where do we know that these karbanos needed tzafin? The Tnan. Rabba Barachan and Kamei the Rabba Basisem Seir Izim Echad Lechatas. The Torah says by the Shtei Lechem, and this is we're talking about the Kifsei Atzeres, right? That was the first thing in the Mishnah. Before we started about the Ashamas, we said that the Kifsei Atzeres, these Shlomim, have to be are Kachei Kachim. And it says the Seir Izim Echad Lechatas. In addition to the Kivsei Atzeres, you also bring a Serizim as a Chatas. Ma'chatas b'tzafin af Shalmei Tzibur b'tzafin. So that's a hekesh to tell you that the Shalmei Tzibur that you do on Shavuos are like the Chatas that we bring, the Seir Echad Lechatas, that it has to be b'tzafin like we saw before. So this also has to be. Amalei Rava, b'chatas mehechal namda me'oila. Where do we know that a Chatas is b'tzafin? We learned it out with a hekesh from oila. Davar alam b'hekesh, chayzom alam b'hekesh. I hope no one's getting PTSD from hearing those words. This is pretty simple, right? We know that in Kachim you can't be chayzer malam b'hekesh. You can't have something learned out with a hekesh, go teaching with a hekesh. So we first know chatas from Ayla. Now we're telling from the chatas to tell you the kifsei atzeres. So Kamar Elamid Tani Reb Mari Breder of Kahana al Leseichem al Zivchei Shalmeichem. We makish Ayla to Zivchei Shlamim. Ma Ayla Kachei Kachim av Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur Kachei Kachim. Tells you that it has a din of kachei kachim. Like we said, there's going to be just the din of kachei kachim brings with it certain dinim as well. Like we said, that it is going to be me'ilah as soon as it's sanctified. As soon as you mekadesh it, it has a din kachei kachim, as opposed to kachum kalam that it only has a din me'ilah after the zrika is done. And additionally, ma'ilah b'tzafin avzev chishal mitzib b'tzafin. What we're talking about is that you see that the din that it has a din safan on zivchei shalmei tzibur. These kachei kachim shalmei tzibur also have a din safan. In fact, the Gemara lakesha kamala mayasa. Okay, but now you caused a problem. You tried to say a hekesh, and you said we can't learn out from the original hekesh that was makish chatas to seirei shalmei tzibur. I'm sorry, the shlom of shalmei tzibur. So what do you do with that hekesh? Ki chatas tells you it's like a chatas ma chatas and a chatas l'zichrei kuna av zivchei shalmei tzibur l'zichrei kuna. It can only be eaten by zichrei kuna. Zak Gemara amalei abayi hachi gabe ayil nazar d'chsev v'hikr v'skarban el Hashem keves ben shnosa tam echad la'oila v'kifsa achas ba shnosa tmima l'chatas. The nazir, when he becomes tummy, he has to bring this ayil. And I'm not sure if the ayil nazir is the one that he brings when he finishes his nazirus. I think this is when he finishes nazirus. I don't think this is when he becomes tummy. But in any case, the ayil that's brought forth by a nazir, it's also hookish to chatas, right? It says he has to bring achas bashnosa, the kifsa achas bashnosa tmima l'chatas, ayil echad tamim l'shlamim. So that's the ayil shlamim. Let's say hachanami name the hekesha akasa v'chatas machatas and nechalas l'zichrei kuna af ayil nazir nami and nechel l'zichrei kuna. If you're saying from the fact that we see over here that we put together a chatas with zivchei shalmei tzibur, it tells you that the chatas is only for zichrei kuna. So therefore, our shalmei tzibur also only zichrei kuna, but we also have a hekesh between the ayil nazir and chatas. So you should have the same restriction.
Why is that so crazy?
Because we're going to see in the next Mishnah in a minute that the Ayal Nazir can be eaten by the whole family. It's not just the Zichrei Kuna. It's something that belongs to, it doesn't have the din that it's restricted only to be eaten in the Beis HaMikdash by Kahanim. It could go out and be eaten by the Kain's family. Does Rashi say this? No, I don't see it. So by Ayal Nazir, it says that the Kohen takes the cooked Zroya from the Ayal, that tells you that the rest of it, the Bailam eat. But the Zroya B'Sheila, that's only Zichrei Kuna. I'm sorry, did I skip?
That's a question.
So the what does that help? It's true that it tells you that the Bailam, that the rest of it the Bailam eat. But what about, why isn't this, the part that's separated, why isn't that restricted to the Zichrei Kuna? So Gemara kasha, it's in a chanami, it's a good kasha. You don't have a response to that. Biba Yisema, another possible teretz, Kodshi Ikri, Kodshi Kodshim lo Ikri. The food, the part that goes to Kehanim is only because it's called, what does the pasuk say? Behenif oisam akoyin tnufa lefnei Hashem kodesh hula koyin al chazer tnufa v'shoy kachuma v'acha yishte hanazir yain. By the Ayal Nazir, it's only called kodesh. It's not called kachay kachim. But by us, by the chatas, it's called kachay kachim, and that's what we're comparing the Sham Mitzibah to, and therefore it also has the din kachay kachim. In fact, the Mara ishkes. So what are we doing with that hekesh? This is what we had all the way back. I don't remember where, but when we were talking about Nazir, if you remember, there are 3 karbanos that have to be brought by the Nazir, and then he's megaleach, he shaves it. So this is not after he becomes tamei. This is at the end of his Naziris. He has to bring 3 karbanos, and by the Torah says about the shlomim that if he does just the shlomim, he immediately can be megaleach, and we're learning that the Torah is telling you from the shlomim that just like the shlomim, if you just do the shlomim, he could be megaleach. The other 2 karbanos, the oila and the chatas, also, if he did any one of the 3 karbanos, he could immediately be megaleach and be yaitza from his naziris. Oh, wow. Okay, I guess we're going to have to stop over here.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Where does this time go?